this rhetoric around the 99% and the 1% in our economy that get all of the gains, that rhetoric actually comes directly from the Occupy Wall Street protests.
Occupy Wall Street, I think, has had a profound influence on the frame of reference on American politics. We talk about the 1%. You might remember that all came out of Occupy Wall Street.
The utility that it produced is to signal to a very large section of the United States population that something is foundationally wrong.
The movement itself became a blueprint for protests around the world and brought the issue of inequality into mainstream politics.
Understand the frustrations that are being expressed in those protests.
I sort of think it's cool. I mean, there's something I like about it.
It really set the stage for the next decade, from the Black Lives Matter movement to the climate justice movement.
Bringing all people together with the love, with the justice, realizing justice is what love looks like in public. That's what you're seeing here today.
Occupy your sound waves, cause we will not be lied to. Occupy your bank account and occupy your health care. Occupy your garden, cause oh my dear, you best be. Occupy your mother tongue and occupy your neighborhood. Occupy reality, deliver depth the best you could. Occupy your homelands, occupy your public schools. Occupy the pen and ink, occupy the law. Occupy Wall Street, occupy your corner store. Occupy the sound waves, occupy your front door. Occupy Wall Street, occupy your basic rights. Occupy the front lines, and when it's time, step up to fight.
Let's talk about the speed with which we are watching this market deteriorate.
We're red everywhere, essentially, down by 4-5%.
We're down over 16%. Dow at the same time has fallen about 18%.
The NASDAQ, everything and more has been completely wiped out.
It was the worst day on Wall Street since the crash of 1987.
From the financial capital of the world, the opening bell is going to ring in 5 seconds, and to be honest with you, we wish it wouldn't.
We are in the midst of a serious financial crisis.
The bailout was far bigger than the Federal Reserve let the public or even members of Congress know at the time. In fact, from the start of the financial crisis in 2007 through March of 2009, the Fed loaned or guaranteed the banks some $7.7 trillion, about half the value of all the goods and services produced by the U.S. economy.
Let me tell you why you're here. You're here because you know something. What you know you can't explain, but you feel it. You felt it your entire life, that there's something wrong with the world. You don't know what it is, but it's there, like a splinter in your mind.
Hello citizens of the internet, we're Anonymous. On September 17th, Anonymous will flood into Lower Manhattan, set up tents, kitchens, peaceful barricades and occupy Wall Street for a few months. Once there, we shall incessantly repeat one simple demand in a plurality of voices. We want freedom. This is a non-violent protest. We do not encourage violence in any way. The abuse and corruption of corporations, banks and governments ends here. Join us. We are Anonymous. We are Legion. We do not forgive. We do not forget. Wall Street. Expect us.
Occupy Wall Street! 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 Occupy Wall Street!
Thank you, everybody.
So basically, we're all showing each other that we're together. Basically, everyone's broken down into small general assemblies to have discussions and real democratic, like try to practice a real democracy. Because right now we're kind of realizing that our democracy is really false, because we don't have a say in anything. And so we want to have a say in it. We got to come together and figure out how we're going to do that.
We are all part of this movement. We amplify each other's voices.
happen? Why protest now? Why not 3 years ago at the collapse?
It's a wonderful question. You never know when the spirit is going to hit. You never know when a movement arises, and it's not a movement with one leadership or two leaders or three leaders. It is spontaneous and instantaneous, coming from the hearts, minds, and souls of people of all colors. What is taking place now is the U.S. fall in response to the Arab Spring here, L.A., Boston, on to Atlanta, on to Dallas, on to Chicago, and other places.
And it always starts like this, right? You know, at the beginning of any movement. And then it grows. And this one's going to grow very fast because, unlike other movements, you don't have to convince the majority of people that these banks and corporate America has screwed their lives over in a serious way.
I think it's not going anywhere. I think it's going to continue because that's what people want. They want it to go away. They want it to be pacified. They want it to be co-opted. You know, believe me, there are forces on either side that would love to do so.
1 month in now on these protests, there seems to have been a little bit of a shift among politicians in the way that they are reacting to these protests and even embracing them. Who right now seems to be embracing these protesters and their movement?
Mr. Chairman, as you know, there are people demonstrating against Wall Street in New York City and other cities around the country, and I think the perception on the part of these demonstrators and millions of other Americans is that as a result of the greed, the recklessness, and the illegal behavior on Wall Street, we were plunged into this horrendous recession we're currently in. Do you agree with that assessment? Did Wall Street's greed and recklessness cause this recession that led to so many people losing their jobs?
It had excessive risk-taking on Wall Street had a lot to do with it, and so did some failures on the part of regulators.
Something's badly broken in America right now. We've got a middle class that has been hammered financially for a generation, and we've got a Washington that works only for those who can hire an army of lobbyists and an army of lawyers. And that means it's not working for the rest of us. So, yeah, I protest that. I've been worried about that. I've been working on that for a very long time.
And the private owners of the park here are now letting them stay, at least for the moment. That after backing down their initial order to have everyone removed yesterday temporarily to clean the park. And now well beyond this area, the movement is growing.
Thousands gathered in Madrid, Lisbon, Berlin, and Frankfurt. In London, more than 2,000 people occupied the financial district and refused to budge.
Early Tuesday morning, a sea of police and protesters in Lower Manhattan. Clashes erupted near Zuccotti Park after police moved in to clear it out hours earlier. Dozens of protesters were arrested after police handed out notices from the owner of the private park in the city. The note said the park had to be cleared because it had become unsanitary and hazardous. The city officials around the country have lost patience with other similar protest encampments. Oakland, California's mayor ordered the tent city cleared in front of City Hall before dawn Monday amid complaints of safety and sanitation.
But the city's decision 2 days ago to remove the movement's encampment at Zuccotti Park energized protesters. Crowds surged out of the park and flooded the financial district.
Here is formally and finally what Occupy Wall Street says and wants. It is, in essence, their special comment. As we gather together in solidarity to express a feeling of mass injustice, we must not lose sight of what brought us together. We write so that all people who feel wronged by the corporate forces of the world can know that we are your allies. As one people, united, we acknowledge the reality that the future of the human race requires the cooperation of its members, that our system must protect our rights, and upon corruption of that system, it is up to the individuals to protect their own rights and those of their neighbors, that the democratic government derives its just power from the people, but corporations do not seek consent to extract wealth from the people and the earth, and that no true democracy is attainable when the process is determined by economic power.
So before I came to school today, I had coffee.
Mr. President! Over 4,000 peaceful protesters. Over 4,000 peaceful protesters. And arrested.
No, that's okay. That's okay.
Is anarchy one reason, though, that
the movement has sort of fizzled out?
That's a great question. And I think that it depends on what your criteria of success is. If the goal of the people who made the movement was to adjust tax brackets by 2%, then we wouldn't have bothered occupying a park and having an unconventional autonomous social movement. People are right to say that if you want to adjust tax brackets, lobby, join a political party. Regardless of our politics, I think that there's a great sense in the United States that think something is fundamentally wrong.
Occupy was a tactic, in fact, a brilliant tactic. I mean, if I'd been asked a couple months earlier whether they should take over, public places, I'd have said it's crazy. But it worked extremely well. Changed public discourse, not policy. It brought issues to the forefront. I think my own feeling is its most important contribution was just to break through the atomization of the society.
Mic check. The next section is normally never mind. It's normally a harmonica solo. I don't have a harmonica, so instead it's going to be an Austin screaming solo. You ready? 1, 2, 3, scream! Comes the harmonica solo. Mic check. But you can keep screaming.
The question is, what happens to the people who are involved in it? Do they go on and develop? Do they move into communities, pick up community issues? Do they organize?
Another important legacy that others have touched on here that, perhaps some people would see as ironic is actually leadership and organization. Because, it was often remarked upon that the movement was like allergic to leadership, allergic to organization. It's a lot more complex than that in terms of the types of organizations and leadership that was going on in the movement. But a lot of people coming out of Occupy learned a lot of lessons of things they loved and things that they wanted to do differently, and went to it, got to it.
The Occupy network actually helped push for Bernie Sanders. Were two groups that were pushing Bernie to run. Originally, they asked Elizabeth Warren to run. She declined, and so they pivoted to Bernie.
Is right after Occupy Wall Street, you see Marley Graham gets killed in the city of New York, and then Trayvon Martin gets killed in Florida, and people start to act up. I flew down to Florida because they wanted somebody to train them in direct action, and helped co-found the Dream Defenders. We marched for miles to Sanford. And then you see a big march in June of 2012 with 50,000 people that said end, stop, and frisk. And I don't think that would have had the new people involved as it did if we didn't have so much repression from the state. And I think part of it was to make people not come out, to make people were really threatened by Occupy at that time. And I think that that's what ended up happening. And it was really beautiful to see people get involved and actually call out police brutality after that.
It's been my pleasure.
It's been my pleasure.
It's been all of our pleasure.
It's been all of our pleasure.
To serve you tonight.
To serve you tonight.
And I have one last message. A quote from the great. Woody Guthrie. To leave you with tonight. And that quote goes like this. Take it easy. But take it.